Warm welcome again to the Ref Show with plenty to talk about from the weekend action in the Premier League and the Football League as well. One or two quite interesting discussion points there. Delighted to say we have a debut on the programme this week, a very distinguished debut as well. Warm welcome to Chris Sutton, former prominent player, now turned to a very pungent pundit at times. He's not shy of backward of coming forward and giving a firm opinion. Former Norwich, Blackburn, Chelsea, Celtic striker. I've missed one or two out.
Yeah, Aston Villa and Birmingham, but I didn't play well there. So.
All right, we'll miss those out, but not England, because you have got an England cap to your name as well.
Celtic's the important one for Jock, isn't it?
Well, Jock War, who funds this website and is our boss, is, of course, a Celtic supporter.
Oh, we know that.
Well, yeah, amazing. Delighted to see you, Chris. Anyway, we're going to illuminate the weekend action, so to speak. Is it lights out, though, on Hull City, literally and metaphorically, after that 10-minute, this is a curiosity point to start with, 10-minute blackout at the Stadium of Light. Lights go out, game suspended. You were, we talked over the week, you were frowning about that.
Well, I was rather surprised that it took 10 minutes. I mean, UEFA, when we go out to European Cup games, they insist that the generator is checked. So every stadium has to have a generator. I'd be amazed that Sunderland, as a football club, don't have, for safety reasons, and other clubs within the Premier League, for safety reasons, a generator. So that clicks into service almost immediately. You know, we had a 10-minute delay. You've got the television companies probably scrambling. That game's live, and you know, the majority of games in the Premier League go out live around the world. So I think it's something that they've now got to look at very carefully and say, hey, we need to cover that particular point.
There seemed to be quite a lot of uncertainty about what the team should have done. I was actually watching the game at the weekend, and I think in the end, I think it was the Hull team who went in the changing rooms after a long period for about 30 seconds. Which the referee didn't seem to have total control of the situation.
It's such a rare event, and it could have been avoided altogether, Keith is suggesting there. Hull lost 3-0 to a reviving Sunderland. Now, there were two penalty shouts, looking good ones, not given in that game, Chris. For Sunderland early on, for a foul by the Hull keeper, and for Hull, Sam Clucas was tripped. Were you surprised at those non-awards?
I thought the first one was a penalty, but I can understand. Was it Lee Mason? Lee Mason. I can understand why he didn't give it. The assistant wasn't on that side of the pitch, so you know he couldn't see from where he was. And Lee Mason, I think his view may have been blocked, but the key thing was there was a deviation on the ball, and I think that Lee Mason would have thought that was David Marshall coming out and making that deviation. In fact, it wasn't. It was Watmore who got the touch. It should have been a penalty, but understandable why it wasn't given.
It's a team game as well, Keith, yeah?
Oh, it's very much a team game. I mean, on both shouts, for me, they were penalty kicks. And I just fear that this referee, and I've talked about him in the past, is a really nice guy. Off the field of play, you couldn't wish to meet.
Bit of a joker, I believe.
Well, absolutely. But the reality is, you don't take that onto the football field. There is a high level of expectation as a professional referee. You deliver a top-class performance. He's falling short of that.
He couldn't see that, though. Yeah. And you know, there should have been a penalty, but he had the benefit of seeing it again and again. And if he thought that David Marshall got the touch, which he did think, and I can understand that, because it happened so quickly. I think there was a defender as well blocking his view, so I get that one.
Sympathetic view. Quite a few penalty or non-penalty incidents over the weekend. The most notorious one, which involved Roger East at Stoke, we'll examine that in part two and what you can do to help an out-of-form and out-of-confidence referee. Andre Marriner certainly isn't that. He's really performing. The experts on this show are extolling his virtues week by week. Manchester United won, Arsenal won. At 0-0 though, and this is maybe splitting hairs, Monreal and Valencia surely should have been a penalty for Manchester United. Chris, your view first of all.
Well, everybody in the studio where I was working said a penalty, but again, I can understand why he didn't give it. There's a little nutmeg, wasn't it? He got the other side. I thought Valencia went down a little bit too easily. And, if there was any doubt, then, don't give it.
Yeah, what was your view, Keith, on
that? I thought it was a penalty kick. If there's a level of that arm stretched out was impeding, and therefore in that sense,
He was already falling though.
yeah. There's no doubt he was going, but he was fouled. So for me, it's a penalty kick. But let's just dwell on Mariner. In the past, I've had this game. When I had it, it blew up dramatically, and as a result, both teams were deducted points, and it was out of nothing. So it is a powder keg game that has a history of, if you like, problems. Not as bad as Liverpool, Man United, or Norwich, Ipswich, which always was pretty fiery. I think in this situation, we've got to praise Andre Mariner, because this season, he's a cool head. He's going about his job in a quiet, efficient manner. Great that he's got the confidence that he needs to perform well.
And he's also assisting the game in letting it flow, and we're getting some good spectacles as a result of it. Interesting comment from Jose Mourinho. We often discuss his comments on this programme on Mariner when it was put to him, should you have had a penalty. His quote was, "If he makes mistakes against my team, there is no intention. He's a good referee." I mean, that's good to hear. But is there a veiled suggestion of the opposite some referees there somewhere? I'm not sure.
Well, I think there is. I mean, I listened to Eddie Howe comment about Roger East, and his comment could have been taken either way, as comment that's criticising below the line, if you like, without totally going over the top.
You said he was my favourite referee, or words to that, but he seemed to say it without sarcasm.
Yeah, well, you can take it as you want.
What do you think? What do you think of them?
I don't think Roger East is Eddie Howe's favourite referee. Well, certainly not at 3:10 on last Saturday. So, what do I make of Mourinho's? There's always sort of a bit of tongue in cheek. I think with Eddie Howe, they're just playing a bit of playing a straight bat.
They'll be over-examine these comments sometimes, you think?
Yeah, maybe so. They'll be bitterly disappointed they didn't get the decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Would you be a manager?
I did manage. I mean, briefly. So, look, I think, on the other side of it now, and, they're looking at referees' performances every week. I do a lot of my work up in Scotland, and I'm not saying it's an easy task. I think, referees need help from their assistants, which they don't often get. In European football, I don't know what these fourth and fifth officials behind the goal, they just seem to be happy to get dressed up in the kit and have a night out. They rarely make a decision when things are glaring right in front of their eyes. But it's tough, but I think that has to, what are fans and managers and players asking for? Common sense.
Would you be a manager again?
I'm enjoying doing this side of it too much at the moment, but I wouldn't totally rule it out.
All right, that's interesting. Right. Okay, we're delighted to have you here, and in the second part, we're going to go to some Football League action in the Championship and lower down as well. But just continuing with the Premier League, Mike Dean was the subject of a blog by our Glenn Turner on a great game, Spurs 3, West Ham 2. Simply superb was Glenn Turner's summary of Dean's performance, Keith, there. Do you concur?
I think Mike Dean is the most consistent referee in the Premier League. He might not be the most liked. He gives what he sees. He's consistent from within the game and consistent from game to game. So, we've supported him dramatically by the fact that he's that guy out in the front that's leading with holding, pulling and grappling. And I think a lot of his actions have actually helped the game within that scenario. We're seeing less of it. But when it does happen, he points directly to the spot. Some people say, "Oh, that's a soft penalty." Well, the player's committed an offence, and Mike's going to penalise it.
As a result, there's a penalty to West Ham in that game. Where do you stand on this issue, Chris?
I like what Mike Dean is doing, and players have to wise up, don't they? And from corner situations, clearly, if you grapple and he sees it, it's going to be a penalty. So, if you're a football player, don't grapple. Watch the ball. Mark as you should. I thought it was a penalty. And I think many this season he has given. People would deem them as soft because of what's happened in previous seasons. But there was supposed to be a clampdown, and he seems to be the only one who is actually carrying out what he's been told.
Could do with more support, quite clearly.
Yeah,
across the board.
I think Glenn is absolutely right in terms of recognising Mike Dean has been one of our top officials, no question.
How does it compare with your day? Was there anything like this problem with the arm holding and wrestling in your day?
It always went on, and it is wrong. I mean, little things like there was one given earlier on in the season where I think it was a Stoke player who wasn't facing the right way. The corner was coming in from that direction, and he's just looking at his man. I think that's a penalty all day long. Was there much contact? Not overly much, but there's no intent to play the ball.
There was enough there. Chris, Keith, thanks very much indeed. That's part one. Do rejoin us. See you in a bit.